Okay, hi everyone. My name is Chris Farrell, and I'm an adult and seniors programmer at the Brantford Public Library. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today for the first webinar of our financial retirement series. Just a few housekeeping details before we get started. And before I introduce our speaker, all of you attending will be able to view the speaker and the host, but have your audio turned off until the end of the information session. There are two options for asking questions. One is the Q&A feature, and you can type in your question, or you can click on the put up your hand function, so you can ask your question verbally. Keep in mind the session is being recorded. Our webinar today is 10 Steps to Retire Without Debt, and joining us is Amanda Martin, a financial educator with the Credit Counselling Society. Amanda has several years of experience and is passionate about building strong community relationships and inspiring others to develop good money management habits. This is the first of 3 sessions of the financial retirement series with Amanda. The second one, Living Well on Retirement Income, will be on February 24th at 2 p.m. So please be sure to register for the next session. And now I'm very excited to introduce Amanda Martin. Welcome, Amanda.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you all for welcoming me into your spaces this afternoon. Today, we're going to be talking about 10 steps to retire without debt. But before we get started, for those of you not entirely sure about who the Credit Counselling Society is and what we do, I just want to give you a little bit of that background about the great organization that I work for. We are a nonprofit registered charity, and we help people across Canada with their money management problems. We help them solve their debt issues, manage their money better, and use credit more responsibly. We do this in a few different ways. We provide free and confidential credit and debt counseling. We offer budgeting assistance. For those people that we can't directly serve, we offer referral services and information. We offer money financial literacy webinars like the session we're having here today, as well as debt repayment programs. We're accessible through our website or through the 800 number that you see here on the screen. And again, remember that our services are free and confidential to use. So we see consumers from all different walks of life and for all different reasons. And I want to share this list with you of the top reasons why we've compiled, of the reasons people have called us over the years since our inception in 1996. And what you'll see here is that all of these things can happen to anyone at any time from any walk of life. And I bring this up because when it comes to our finances, quite often we may resist the urge or the need to get help because we may be feeling bad about how we've managed our money. So I share this with you so that you know that if you should be struggling with your finances or know someone who is, that you're not alone. Canadians all across the country have these same problems, whether they be through something you've done or not done, or through no fault of your own. Sometimes life just happens. We are here to help. So one thing I'd like to impress upon everyone is that the sooner you reach out for help when it comes to your finances, the more options you have available. Now, diving into our agenda for today, we're going to be talking about the different trends in aging, as well as obviously the title of our session, which is the 10 Steps to Retire Without Debt. And I'm going to leave you with some resources as well. My hope is that by the end of the session today, you'll be able to know and describe your own financial situation. You'll be able to identify what actions you need to take to retire without debt. And hopefully you'll be able to have a list of resources that you can access for more help. Now, some trends that we're seeing, 35% of Canadians are struggling to pay their monthly bills. Over half of Canadians have no budget. Over half of Canadians lie about their finances. And the 55 plus age group is the society's fastest growing age segment. There are all sorts of stats on this. The 65 plus group has the highest mortgage delinquency rate, meaning people over the age of 65 are having trouble keeping up with the cost of their home. The 65 plus group has the fastest growing delinquency rate for non-mortgage debt. And Canadians in general have the highest household debt load amongst the G7. It can be very scary. We're seeing more clients retiring with debt. Here at CCS, we're seeing more clients unable to retire when they'd like to because of their debt load. And more these days, clients supporting adult children and grandchildren on their incomes. So what can you do to prevent from being a part of some of these scary statistics? We're going to talk about that in the 10 steps. So step one, first and foremost, we need to understand the importance of retiring without debt and put some meaning behind it. Remember that after you retire, your income will reduce considerably. So imagine if you have a debt or a few debts that you are still dealing with after you retire, how might this impact you as your cost of living continues to rise, but your income and your capacity to earn have reduced significantly? Your ability to do what you want to do during your retirement could be restricted by debt payments. And consider, what else would you like to be doing with your money instead of paying back those debts? Maybe you'd rather be using the money to travel or to spend more time with friends, having mimosas over patio brunches pre-pandemic when that was a thing. Or if you're like me, maybe you'd like to spend your money looking after a house full of animals and tending to your garden. But there's so much more that we could be spending our money on rather than on paying back debts. When it comes to what we'd rather see our money do for us, it's a good idea to consider what our money values are. What does money mean to you? Does it mean safety and security? Does it mean the freedom to make more choices? Does it mean accessibility to adventure? Considering what your money values are can really help with motivating you to get those debts off your back, because it can be a good reminder of what you want your money to be doing for you instead. Part of planning for what you want your money to do for you according to what your money values are is knowing what your household income is. This is going to help you with creating a structured plan on what you want your debt-free life to look like and how you want to get there. Also, be sure to consider all of your sources of income, including current employment income, any government benefits you might be getting, and other sources of income like rental income, supplementary employment income that you might have, and maybe even money that you can make off of any hobbies and things that you enjoy doing in your spare time. Crafts, selling your handiwork. Will any of these things increase or decrease when you retire? I do want to point out that I will make available to Chris at the library here a copy of these slides for you to reference later, so she can send them out to the registrants on this list. In addition, we have some other resources that I'll also include that might be helpful for you in some of these stages of planning. Aside from knowing what your income is, it is also a good idea to know what your assets are. So, what you have. Assets can include anything of significant value, might be your home, any vehicles that you own or use, any art, antiques, or jewelry. It's good to know what your assets are, because if you should require some supplemental cash, knowing what your assets are gives you the option of selling some of them in order to meet your needs. It certainly might not be your first option, but it is an option that some people should be or may need to be considering. Next, You want to make sure you also know what your liabilities are so that you can plan for how to pay them off in order to live the debt-free life that you're aiming for when you retire. You can start by noting down what your liabilities are. You can list all of your secured debts, meaning all of the debts that are tied to an asset, usually your home or your vehicles, as well as their value and how much you owe on them. You want to outline your mortgages, your vehicle loans, as well as your any home equity lines of credit or anything secured to your property. Here's an example. Let's make a collective list of your assets as well as your liabilities. So for example, you might have a home that's worth $400,000. You might have a rental property worth $300,000. Perhaps there's some vehicles worth about $20,000 and maybe some household goods worth about $5,000. These would be your assets totaling about $725,000. Now, with regards to liabilities, you could still be owing about $200,000 on your mortgage, maybe $20,000 on a home equity line of credit, $10,000 remaining on a vehicle loan, and this would mean that you are still owing $430,000 overall on your debts. Now, if this was your respective financial circumstance, something to consider here might be what life might look like if you were to sell your rental property and downsize your current home. This would likely reduce your mortgage payments and give you a good lump sum of money to include in your retirement savings. You could also downsize but keep your rental property so that you can continue to earn a passive income from it. Ultimately, how you choose to approach dealing with your assets and your liabilities will depend on your money values. And if you're looking for some guidance on how to approach dealing with your assets and liabilities, a great place to start would be having an appointment with a credit counselor. Excuse me, I had a tickle in my throat. Another step to take in dealing with your debts includes itemizing and prioritizing your unsecured debts. Oops. How you can start doing this is by listing, again, all of your unsecured debts, their interest rates, as well as the amounts that you have outstanding. You're going to include your credit cards, any other unsecured lines of credit, any personal or consolidation loans, as well as any payday loans that might be included. So again, you first want to note which unsecured debts you are owing on. This would include any credit cards, loans, and lines of credit. Also note what the annual interest rate is on each unsecured debt and what amounts you are owing on each of these debts. In this example, we see that there's one credit card at 19.9% with a balance of $3,000, another one with a balance of $2,500 with a slightly lower interest rate at 18.9%, one personal loan for $15,000 and one line of credit for $25,000. So the total unsecured debts for this example is $45,500. Now consider what it might look like if we were to add this to the list of assets and liabilities that we saw earlier. This will likely have an impact on the role that your assets might play in helping you to pay off your debts, if that's an option you might be exploring. Of course, there are more options to consider. And again, to explore which options would be best for you and your household, it would be best to speak to a credit counselor or a financial planner. Next, it's a great idea to realistically know how much of a surplus you're left with every month after you've taken care of your monthly expenses. In order to figure this out, you need to first calculate what your total monthly expenses are. Our monthly expenses can essentially be broken down into three different categories, that being fixed, variable, and savings. Our fixed expenses include things like rent or mortgage payments, utilities, cell phone bills, and debt payments. Those things that we can't really get around, the basics that we need to make sure are paid. Variable expenses include things like groceries, gas, eating out, restaurants, entertainment, and personal care expenses such as haircuts or salon services. Keep in mind that variable expenses are expenses that you know will occur, but their amounts and the date on which they might come out will likely be different every time. Savings expenses could include saving for things like retirement or saving up for irregular expenses, which are those things that we know will come up, like property taxes or vet bills for annual vaccinations, but it might look different in terms of when they come up and how much we might spend on them. It's also a good idea to be setting money aside for emergency expenses as well. As we all know, emergencies happen and we just don't know when or how much they're going to cost us. By creating an emergency fund, you should be able to manage most emergencies and turn them into inconveniences. Certainly, $1,000 won't cover all emergencies, but it is a good place to start. And if it feels like a daunting task to think about how you could save up $1,000, perhaps try breaking it down into smaller figures so it feels more manageable. For example, $40 every biweekly paycheck. A long term emergency goal might include 3 to 6 months of income. This could look different for every person, but the reason we recommend trying to save for 3 to 6 months worth of emergencies is because it generally takes about that length of time for people to get back on their feet, whether that's through unexpected layoffs or having a family emergency or illness. Once you have a good idea of what your monthly expenses are, it's time to start working on tracking your expenses. Now, there is no right or wrong way to track your expenses. The important thing is that you do it. So, whatever works for you. I know it can be daunting and overwhelming to think, what more can I add to my list of things to do? But trust me, this little bit of tracking and this little bit of effort up front will help you with your budget and with your planning in the long run. So, I'm going to give you a lot of really easy ways that you can do this because I know everybody thinks and works a little bit differently. So just choose what works best for you. You can use the easy and plain pen and paper. Every time you spend money on something that you're tracking, you can write it down and mark down how much it cost and what it was. Here at CCS, we do have a physical tracking booklet. However, with our offices closed right now, it's challenging to get them out to people. So we do have them available on our website, so you can print them out. And it's really just a sheet that shows you days of the week at the top, categories of things you might spend money on along the side, and then a space in the middle for you to write down how much you've spent every day in each category. There's a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheets or computer software that you can use to plug in your expenses. And if you're saying, okay, Amanda, already I'm glazing over because I don't want to do anything of what you've said already. It's too hard. I have the easiest method of all, which is the envelopes method. So just take your regular old envelope and for every expense that you're tracking, put the title of it on the front. So you'll have an envelope for, say, gasoline, an envelope for groceries, an envelope for, say, entertainment. And then when you spend money on those things or when you spend money, ask for a receipt, or if you're doing it online, just jot it down on a piece of paper and then put it in the envelope. At the end of the day, empty your purse, your pockets, your bag, and put it in the appropriate category. When you're done your several weeks of tracking, then you can just pull out the envelope, tally up what your expenses were, and then you'll know how much you've spent in each category. And of course, in this digital day and age, there is an app for that. So there are smartphone apps available for you to help track your expenses. I know many participants in my webinars have mentioned the app called Mint, and that will uh, track your expenses. It will go into your bank account. So it's giving access to your bank account, and it will spit out all of the things that you spend money on. Sherry's mentioned here, you can check your bank statements too, and that's a great idea. One thing that I do want to point out to you when you're dealing with the apps, or even if you're just going off of your bank statement to track, if you've withdrawn cash from your bank account, when you're going back after the fact, it's really hard to determine what you spent that money on. So it's a good idea, even if you are checking your bank statements, when you've pulled out cash from the bank, to make sure to get receipts for those items so that you know exactly where all the dollars and cents are going. But at the end of the day, it's important that you do it, not how you do it. So find the system that works for you. And if it seems, again, overwhelming, you don't need to track all your expenses. I mean, you might know what you're spending on a number of things. Maybe just start in those categories that you might not be so sure about. Budgeting largely involves subtracting our monthly expenses from our net pay, and it can also include planning for irregular expenses, which are those things that come up like property taxes and vet bills, but might look different in terms of when they come up and how much we might spend on them. We often forget these things that don't come up all the time, and these expenses can definitely add up quickly. For example, it doesn't take much to add up to $3,000 in a year for irregular expenses. And if you don't have that money set aside for this, you'll end up reaching for credit or using money that had a different purpose altogether. So, we're going to walk through what saving for irregular expenses might look like. And one thing to consider is planning for higher costs and payments so that you're not caught off guard if an irregular expense costs more than what you may have expected. So, we have these types of expenses that come up in all areas of our life. In our house, in our living, with our work, and in our personal circumstances. Some things that might come up once in a while when considering our irregular expenses might be property taxes, those utility bills. I know that water bill is one I always forget because it's not every month. Repairs and maintenance. And even if we don't own our home, there's still certain small appliances or household items that come up once in a while or need repair or replacement. Insurance may be one of those irregular expenses if we don't pay our plans monthly. Car maintenance, those oil changes or those, regular maintenance items like brakes and things like that. Our annual memberships, dentist, optometrist, our furry babies and pet bills and prescriptions. Some of us for work might have bills that we have to cover, annual certifications or uniforms or safety equipment. In Canada, we have seasons. As we change over for seasons, we might realize, our clothing or shoes may need replacing. Many of us celebrate holidays or birthdays. These things cost money, and we tend to forget about putting them in our budget because they're not a regular monthly expense. But these are the things that can bust our budget and have us going towards credit if we don't have a plan for them. When it comes to managing irregular expenses, it might be best to create a plan to deal with them. This plan could include opening up a new bank account to save for these expenses. You could add up the cost of every irregular expense over the course of an entire year and then divide this by 12 monthly or by 26 biweekly and deposit this amount into your new account on a regular basis. One thing that I like to recommend when you're trying to remember all of those different expenses that you have over the year is go through your calendar. It'll be a good refresher and a jogger for your memory of the different birthdays and the different expenses and appointments you may have had that will come up. Thereafter, it's just a matter of tracking the ins and outs of this account and ensuring that you now have the necessary amount in there for those expenses that you know will be coming up. Some other things to consider are, is the dollar amount or the number that you're working with feasible for you? If it's not, where else can we cut back? When we look at back at our irregular expenses, and is there anything there that is more of a want than a need? Or is there something else that we would rather do or arrange for our money? If you're still struggling with budgeting, please do call us. We are here to support you. We can help with your budgeting by offering you different strategies that can work for you. Because everyone's situation is very different and individual. So here's an example. If your annual irregular expenses came up to $3,000 a year, then on a monthly basis, you would need to deposit $250 a month into your irregular savings account. Or if you were doing it with your biweekly pay periods, you would put $116 aside every pay towards those irregular expenses. Having it in a separate savings account really keeps the job that you have for those funds separate and apart and ready for when you need them. Now, once you have a good idea of what your monthly expenses are, inclusive of your irregular expenses, it's time to determine a manageable plan to pay off your debts. One way to start doing this is to create a realistic plan that will ensure you're debt-free before your first day of retirement. And remember, your plan will be based on your income, assets, debts, and time frame. Further to this, there's essentially three different options that you have when it comes to dealing with your debt, depending on the amount of debt you're working with. Now, you could opt to work on dealing with your debts by yourself. You could get help from a nonprofit credit counseling agency like the Credit Counselling Society. Or again, depending on the amount of debt that you have, you may consider utilizing legal options like consumer proposal or bankruptcy. So we're going to talk about all of these options in a little bit more detail here. If you're opting to deal with your debts on your own, then the first thing to do is budget, budget, budget. You need to track your expenses and find out where your money is really going. And by tracking your expenses, it will allow you to see what some of your spending habits are, where your money is going, and where you might be able to cut back on some of those expenses. By cutting back on the expenses, you can use the surplus to put towards your debt. The other thing you can consider when you're looking at self-administered options is increasing your income. Is there a way to get overtime? Or is there a way to pick up some more hours or a part-time side job? Or is there a way to utilize your hobbies to make yourself some extra money and use that surplus to pay off debts? Keep in mind as I go through these following slides about debt options and solutions, I'm simply giving you information and education around the different options that are available. Only you can know what options are going to be best for you. And even then, you may still feel comfortable or more comfortable speaking to a professional to help you determine what the options may be most beneficial for you. Also consider if any of your assets can help you to pay off your debts. For example, can you downsize your home now? Is there a vehicle that you can sell? I know, especially with this pandemic, as horrible as it's been, there have been some trade offs. Many of us have gone to working from home, which means for some people that there's not that need for the extra vehicles in the household that there once was. For some of us, I know with myself, there's a really big chance that I won't be returning to a job where I have to go to an office. So the need for a vehicle does decrease. So consider these options. Can you sell a recreational property, recreational vehicles, the adult toys, as I like to call them, the extras? Can you sell any art, antiques, or jewelry? Again, any proceeds that you get from these sales can be used to pay off debts. There's also smaller items and ways to increase your income to help pay off money. And that's, the buy and sell marketplaces online. There's a lot of buy and sell groups on different social media outlets like Facebook, Kijiji, things like that. So if you have items that are just kind of sitting around, kicking around in your garages and the backs of your closets, and you have perfectly good items, you might be able to make some extra cash selling some of those items as well. There's also really great merit to communicating with your creditors about what they may be able to offer you. For example, you could try asking for lowered interest rate on your debts to help you to get debt free faster. Maybe you're eligible for a special promotion or product that offers you a better rate than what you're getting now. There are times when creditors are able to even do this for you, even if it's just for a short period of time. Now, keep in mind that some creditors will either increase the interest rate on debts after a set period of time, or they may return the rate to what it was originally. So you really want to make sure that you understand all of the terms and conditions of what a creditor is offering you when they agree to lowering your interest rate. Another thing you can do is try to borrow products from a bank that comes with a lower interest rate. And consider even looking into conventional financing like a consolidation loan or a line of credit, or even refinancing your mortgage. A lot of times it may make a lot of sense to do so. These types of options will allow you to make one monthly payment to one creditor instead of trying to keep track of who you owe what to, and generally at a lower interest rate, and will also then help you to get debt free faster. It's also important that I mention that as we're going through these options, I'm going through these debt solutions from the most desirable to the least desirable by way of outcomes, or by way of consequences. Obviously, when at all possible, it's best to be able to manage the debts on your own in a way that you can do by yourself. Now, something else to keep in mind, if you're looking to manage your debts on your own, there's two ways that you could approach paying back your debts. The first is what we like to call the debt avalanche. This is where you would pay your debts off in order of interest rate. So you would start with the highest interest rate debt first, focusing on paying off that one balance at a time. Now, I'm not saying not to pay your other bills. Keep in mind, you're always going to be continuing to make your minimum payments on all of your other debts, but any surplus or extra money that you have going towards your debt payments is going to go all on that highest interest rate debt first. This will help you to pay your debts down faster and, of course, with less interest costs to you. The second method is what we like to call the debt snowball. And this is where you would pay the debts off in order of balance, starting with the lowest balance first. Now, these methods, it's good to know yourself best. There's a lot of things as human beings that we do. Um, Instant gratification is one of them that we like. We like to see things happen fast, or we lose interest. It's hard for us to stay motivated if we don't see results quickly, just simply as human beings. Some are better than others, but generally speaking. So for those of us that have a hard time staying on task with those financial goals, where it's hard to see results right away, the debt snowball might be your answer, because focusing on paying off the one balance at a time from the smallest balance first. Of course, again, you're always making your minimum payments on all your other debts, but your surplus and all your additional funds that you have for your debt payment is going on that small balance. So what's going to happen is those debts are going to start getting paid off quickly. You're going to see results fast. You're going to have some quick satisfaction and getting some debts paid off quickly, those small balance ones, which is going to help to keep you motivated and keep you going to work towards the rest of those debts. Now, the other way to go about getting some help with your debts is to call for some assistance from a credit counseling agency. Now, with the Credit Counseling Society, they offer one of two programs that might be a good fit for you. And it's important to mention that certainly with any nonprofit credit counseling agency, including ours, as long as it's a nonprofit, they're going to be looking out for your best interests, which means that they're going to offer you the solutions that fit your circumstances. So when you call an agency like the Credit Counseling Society, you sit with someone and they go over your entire set of circumstances and everything to do with your finances. And when it comes to our finances, the numbers truly do dictate the solutions. So once we've reviewed everything, we are able to come up with some options for you and allow you to choose what works best for your life. One of those two options that we have is the debt management program, which is essentially a voluntary repayment agreement between you and your creditors. It is not a loan. We do not lend money. It is an agreement facilitated by a credit counseling agency where they work with your creditor as well as you to reduce or eliminate completely the interest that you're paying on your debt in order to get you debt free in a time period of 5 years or less. This is a program that is intended to get the creditors back the maximum amount of money that was borrowed while putting the client in a position that is so much better, that sees them debt free in a time period that is not 50 years down the road, right? Oops, sorry about that. So through the DMP, the agency would work with the creditors to see how close to 0% we might be able to bring your interest rates down to on any unsecured debts that you have. Now, if you were to participate in this program, you would end up making one monthly payment to the credit counseling organization, and then that would be dispersed amongst your various creditors for you. Participating in this program will have an impact on your credit report, but what the report looks like will vary from household to household because each individual's circumstance is going to look different from another's. So in this sense, there is no blanket solution, but there's definitely a tailor-made plan out there for you. Lastly, it's a good thing to note that the maximum amount of time that would be spent on a debt management plan would be 5 years. Our second option is our settlement program. This program would allow you to pay a percentage of your debt in one lump sum, whatever the amount is that your creditors would agree to. You can try coming to a settlement agreement with your creditors on your own, or you can do it through us or another credit counseling agency or any other nonprofit debt counseling organization. Note that this option, whether you do it through the help of an organization like ours or whether you do it on your own, it may come with a cost associated with it, and it's advisable to get any agreements that you get made in writing. Excuse me one moment, I have to sneeze. Okay, sorry, thank you. Okay, now, if you're trying to pay your debts back on your own or through the help of an organization, and those are not options for you because of the amount of debt that you owe, it might be time to consider a legal option like consumer proposal. This option is a legal process in which you pay back a portion of your total debt. You would be asked to make fixed monthly payments for a set period of time. Consumer proposals can include some government debts. and it does impact your credit negatively and leave a permanent record. It is a public record and a legal option, so it will stay on your credit report for a minimum of 3 years after completion of the program, and there are fees associated with this option. Another legal option would be to declare bankruptcy. This option is also a legal process in which you receive relief from your debts. You would be, or you may be required to surrender certain assets. You can include some government debts in this, and you may or may not be required to make payments. It does impact your credit negatively for a longer period of time, and it is a public record and therefore leaves a permanent record. It will stay on your credit report for up to 7 years after your discharge date of bankruptcy. And there, of course, are fees that apply to this as well. Whichever option you pursue, you also want to be really careful about how you use your credit card, but it's important to use your credit card wisely. It's very important to ultimately stop using credit and use cash or debit wherever possible. When we talk about using your credit cards wisely, what does this mean? Well, let's take a look. And, I want to say credit's not good or bad. It's how we use it that can be a tool or a trap. So let's say, for example, we want to, I'm going to go on vacation. It's going to cost $3,000. I don't have $3,000 saved up, but you know what? I'm going to pretend that this is pre-pandemic. This is a chance of a lifetime, and it's a deal. It's half price. I'll never get this trip again. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead. I have a credit card. I'll put it on there. The interest rate on my credit card is 19.9%. And we know that minimum payment on our credit cards are 2% of your balance, which in this case, if I owed $3,000, I could afford that minimum payment of $60 a month. So I'm going to go for it. Now, that $3,000 trip that I want to take, and at $60 a month with almost 20% interest, how long do you think it will take me to pay that back? Feel free to type in the chat if you'd like to give a guess. It will literally take over 52 years to pay off that $3,000 plus interest if I just make the minimum payment of $60 a month on or before the due date every month. And that's also considering that if I never ever use that card ever again. In addition to the $3,000, I'll also pay an additional $12,709 in interest. Okay, trip isn't looking so good to me now. I know I said it was a trip of the lifetime, but I don't want to pay for it for 52 years. So back to the drawing board. Same $3,000, same credit card. I reviewed my budget. I decided this is important to me. I want to do this. But you know what? I can afford more than the minimum payment. I don't even have to double the minimum payment, but I'm going to put $40 more. So I'm going to pay $100 a month on that same $3,000. Guess how long it's going to take me to pay off my debt now? Just over 3.5 years. And the interest, well, yes, 19.9%, still high, is only going to be $1,184 for a total of $4,184 versus that $15,000 that I would have paid had I just made minimum payments. So what I want to point out here is the fact that many people don't know what their minimum payment is on their credit cards or even how the interest is calculated. So do be aware of your credit card terms and know how much interest you're paying each month. Those very, very small changes that you make in increasing your payment on top of that minimum is going to pay off in dividends. It's right here in black and white. Those small little differences, those extras that you put down will pay off. So anytime you have the opportunity, please put extra above and beyond the minimum payment due. Now, aside from making sure we're using our credit cards wisely, we also need to make sure that we're creating savings for ourselves that we can use to live off of after we retire. There's a lot of ways we can put money towards our savings. Some fun ways could be to include the 52-week money challenge. That is a challenge where you essentially every week you put $1 into a savings account, and the following week you put $1 extra. So week 1 I would put in $1, week 2 I would put in $2, week 3 $3, and so on. There's some fun tips here. A 2-liter bottle of dimes can add up to $700 when filled up. You could also have an account set up with no debit card, so money can only go in and cannot come out. You can even look up and look into a top up or round up option where your purchase gets rounded up to the nearest dollar and the amount used to round up your purchase goes into a savings account. Now, forgive me, I know that Scotiabank does that, and I'm sure there's a number of the top 5 banks that do that as well, but that's a great way to save. $50 a week is $2,600 in a year in savings. My point being, certainly go see a certified financial planner and do some retirement savings. But my point here being is if we're looking to repay some debt, earn some extra cash, or find some savings so that we can pay off this debt or have some extra money for ourselves, every little bit counts. You could even make it so that money is automatically transferred into a savings account for you on a day that coincides with your payday so that you don't have to think about moving money around. It just happens on its own after you get it set up. Every little bit counts. And again, these types of automatic transfers can also be set up for your RSPs, so your registered retirement savings plans, your TFSAs, your tax-free savings accounts, as well. So you can avoid the headache of tracking these savings and wondering if you remembered to put money into these accounts any given month. And of course, for the best advice on TFSAs or RSPs, it is best to speak with a financial planner. Certainly be best to reach out to your financial institution as well. They can always give you advice as well. And remember, this is your money. Please do ask questions and get second opinions if you're not sure. This is your livelihood. So step 9 in our 10 steps to retire without debt webinar is simply learn to say no. Whether it's to yourself or to others who are asking you for financial commitments that are going to take away from your financial goals for retirement. Be sure to identify what you say yes to that will get in your way. Learn to say no to using credit. Sometimes we have to say no to helping family. Maybe we need to say no to those extra vacations. Or maybe it's renovations that we need to consider. Or is there something else? Basically, it's just a good idea to identify that you haven't allocated anything that you haven't allocated for financially that's going to take away from your saving for retirement, and ensure that you're saying no to these things. And our last step essentially comes down to taking action. So what might taking action look like? It might look like reducing your expenses and starting to track your spending. Might be increasing your income, monetizing that hobby that you have or getting that part-time job. Might be creating some savings, or maybe even trying to live within your retirement means, what your retirement numbers are going to be like before you actually retire, to see what that's going to feel like and how that might be. Taking action can also include talking to a professional to help you come up with a plan for eliminating your debts, creating savings, and planning for retirement in a more personalized way and more in depth for your respective circumstances. A professional could include a certified financial planner, your financial institution. It could be a nonprofit credit counselor. These professionals can help you identify what your retirement goals are and certainly help you to get there. Oops. So, my hope is that now you're able to describe your financial situation, identify some steps and actions that you need to take to retire without debt, and have a few resources under your belt. I will right now actually just put my email address in the chat here. In the event that you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to do so now. But also, if there's anything that you might like to ask that you don't feel comfortable doing so in this format, feel free to email me.
Thank you, Amanda. That was very informative and a lot of good tips. I have one question before anyone has a question. The CCS tracking booklet, can you just download that off your website?
Yes, you can, absolutely. What I can do even is when I send you the copy of these slides is I can send you the link that'll take you right to the tracker. So we can have that easily accessible. But
Great, thank
yes,
you.
it is on the website, nomordebts.org. It's very easy to use. They've just revamped the whole site and it's really great. It gives you a whole list of resources, tools, blogs, all sorts of great things.
If anyone has any questions, you can type them in the Q&A, or you can put up your hand and we can unmute you if you want to ask Amanda a question. But go ahead if anyone has any questions.
We will as you mentioned at the beginning of our webinar today, this is a series, so we will be having those additional sessions where we'll be talking about other retirement ideas and topics that might be beneficial. So hopefully you can all join us for those as well. And actually, I'll just see if I can't bring up that tracker right now and put it in the chat for you.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, everybody looks like they're thankful for your presentation. Thankful for your presentation, and
Okay.
I think we can say thank you for everyone for attending, and thank you, Amanda. And please be sure to sign up for the other two seminars, February 24th and March 24th. And thank you for attending, and we'll say goodbye for now.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too, Amanda.